depend on that to some degree.
And would you be able to say that the seeing and hearing being accurate did not require that the seeing and the hearing is in some sense a design?
If you accept that evolution by natural selection as a form of design, then it meets the criteria of design.
Okay. Yes?
I have a counter-argument to this that I call exaction.
Mm-hmm.
So the senses are impressive. They
Yes.
allow us to do these things, and that sort of thing. Now, I want to describe a different system of sense. It involves the eyes
Mm-hmm.
and the ears and the orientation mechanisms in the brain, which I've evolved obviously to run without falling over. Running's quite complicated,
Mm-hmm.
as when they tried to get robots to do it. So I've evolved to be able to run to satisfaction. But also, using the same system, I was able to learn to ride a bicycle
Right.
relatively quickly. Now, I don't think anyone would say, wow, that system allows you to ride a bike. You must be in some sense designed for that higher and more impressive performance.
Mm-hmm. Well, Taylor might say that it was. Because he would say that,
I hadn't really thought of bicycles as being fundamentally universe.
well, are you learning any metaphysical information when you learn how to ride a bike? Like, are you learning something about the nature of the universe when you learn to ride a bike?
Yes.
Then he would say that means that whatever faculties you use to learn that are design faculties. Because there's metaphysics involved in learning how to ride a bike even. Because you're learning about what's immediately outside of you and what to do to get through it without falling over or hitting something. Yes?
To me, Taylor's argument seems a little bit like the argument we heard last week. You listen to a scientific explanation of something and then you say, oh yes, but God did it. So we go back to the Big Bang, yes, well God started the Big Bang going, somebody must have started it, and evolution seems to have made a pretty good job of creating organisms that can do stuff and be aware of their environment. They're pretty good at it, must be designed, God did it. It's just sort of bringing God in at the end of the argument. Instead of saying God created the world in 7 days or Genesis 2, God created Adam and Eve, we've gone back a stage, but we're still just putting God in there for no reason that seems logical to me.
Well, Taylor would say in response to that, he's not putting in God with this argument, he's putting in the designer.
Okay, a design.
Yeah, if you want to interpret that as God, you can. If you want to interpret that as natural selection, you can.
But putting in something extra, which the science doesn't really demand, is what I'm saying. Darwin and subsequent evolutionists didn't need God, and most of the astrophysicists don't need God. But these two gentlemen who've been talking to us about just seem to put God in at the end, and I'm having difficulty getting my head around why they're putting God in, apart from because they're trying to sell religion, to put it very crudely.
Well, you certainly have that would be a legitimate point in response to William Lane Craig. But Richard Taylor isn't explicitly trying to sell religion. I think what Richard Taylor would say is he's doing biology. That actually the biologists, that they were worth their salt. What they would include into the theory of evolution is that accuracy implies design. So that we should at least characterize evolution as designing in order to know that we have any kind of accuracy when we use our ears or our eyes. He would probably say that is biological explanation more than it is theological explanation, although you can interpret it as having theological consequences.
I have to admit, when you look at a highly evolved natural phenomena, it does appear to be design, which is where Paley's argument came in the first place. You've got this complex organism, it must have been designed, and the designer must have been God. Darwin came along and said natural selection will produce that complex design and show how that could happen. So you can logically say that natural selection is a form of designer, if you like, but it's not one that actually is driven by any intellect.
Well, that's interesting. If natural selection is a designer, how do we know it's not driven by intellect?
Okay, so looking at that conclusion, I think where Taylor goes wrong is he uses the word design. I think a much better thing, a much better phrase might be that are successfully evolved to rather than designed, right? And then the argument works. But it's like the error is in begging the question or a sort of fallacy rather than so it's because he's used the word design incorrectly.
Okay, so can you imagine two different kinds of evolution? One in which is totally random, and one which it's got a design plan.
Well, a totally random one would not evolve.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would you say that by saying we're in the second camp, we're sort of the design plan version of evolution, that's a mistake?
I think again, as soon as you use the word design plan, you are. I mean, it's like when I talk to my sort of previous religious boss, right? He when I said, how do we know that God exists? And his question was, well, where did creation come from? So the question is wrong. So the mere fact of using the word creation is the fallacy. So here, the mere fact of using the word design when a less strict form, rather than just saying designed, works.
What about something like randomine as opposed to random? So you've got random evolution, randomine, and design. So instead of saying you have design, you have randomine, which is like, it's random, but there's a plan. Something like that be what you're thinking of? So
No, there's no plan. There's no plan.
Say selection by natural selection. So there's a criteria which, in evolution, you've got a variation, and you've got a selection criteria, and that will gradually produce beings that all interact, and you get more complexity. And there's an element of randomness in that, but the system does evolve. You can get things that throw it back, and it evolves again in a different way. But it's totally there's no actual conscious design, but the process you could actually claim is a form of design in itself. In other words, the fact that you've got an element of randomness and a selection criteria forces something that appears to be design.
Would you call this non-conscious design?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Roger?
Now we've actually mentioned the word randomness. Comes to me a thought. It seems that we've been quite good, our brain seems to be quite good sometimes in finding patterns even in randomness. I mean, whether we're creative people or when we observe evolution or something, there's always a story you can tell.
Yeah.
Or for example, I remember, I think it's Philip K. Dick who actually wrote The Man in the High Castle by just playing I King, that oracle, I think it's a Chinese oracle, and by just randomly picking up different object, well, it's not cards, but it's similar. Mm-hmm. Basically, he designed his story, and the story made sense somehow. So, I mean, at some point, the concept of design, is it not just that we perceive randomness as something that makes sense because it led to something, and then suddenly there must be a design.
Okay, so it could be that we innately project designs onto random processes?
Yes, that's probably, yeah.
So maybe that could be something that is a paradox of science, because science itself could be projecting designs onto random processes.
We come up with a hypothesis, which is effectively something we've developed in our imagination, and then science, we get other people and ourselves to test that hypothesis. If it works, we'll develop it. If it doesn't work, we dump it.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem for scientists to have to deal with, actually. Yes?
Evolution has produced legs, but design has produced wheels. And if there was a designer, I want to know why the designer of evolution, why they didn't come up with the wheel, why we aren't all
Wheels in evolution.
Yeah.
You can find wheels in...
and why birds haven't got propellers and 6 wings, which were much better than articulated wings in the
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question because
So the design is very faulty.
there's a difficulty in explaining the difference between humans and everything else when people get into evolutionary biological explanations, because we tend to describe the world as if it's kind of like it's designed by natural selection, and we describe ourselves as though we designed ourselves. But according to evolution, we're part of the natural selection design too. So that means our symphonies and our cars and our cancer machines are as much a part of nature as mountains and streams. So on that note, I'm going to have to let you guys go because the time is up. But thanks so much for a wonderful, amazing discussion. And I'm going to offer one more question before I go. Yes?
Yes, I think human brain and human knowledge is limited. What the phenomena we see, we only interpret it according to our knowledge, according to the things we have known. When we talk of design, we design the cars, we design computers, so we know the design thing. So whatever else we see, we name it design. So whatever we interpret is according to our senses as well as the knowledge we have. The thing, the universe that we are calling design, this is our limited knowledge, our limited observation. We don't know what design that is.
Yeah. And this, Taylor would say, might be one of the reasons why his first premise isn't true. He's not necessarily committed to the first premise being true, only that if you believe premises 1 and 2, you must by consistency believe the conclusion. On that note, thanks so much for a fabulous discussion. And if you're interested in the next one, it's going to be on the 28th of September. It's going to be on the argument from the principle. 28th, sorry. It's going to be on the Friday night, and it's going to be an argument from the principle of sufficient reason. So anyways, thanks so much for coming, and thanks so much for your interest. So, if